Hey everyone, and welcome to the final part in the series on building the navigation framework for a web app in Toddle. Now in parts 1 and 2 we do it exclusively with building the UI elements, and in this third and final part we will focus on building out the workflow needed to achieve the collapsible menu functionality, the workflow to show and hide hidden containers on the page based on the menu item selected, and then finally we will take a look at how to navigate to a different page within the app and then navigate back to the home page itself. Okay, so let's kick things off by looking at the collapsible sidebar workflow. To build this out in Toddle is actually quite straightforward, and to achieve it we will use variables, events, formulas, and classes. But to begin, let's just do a high-level overview of the workflow itself. Here we can see that the workflow will be made up of 4 separate stages. First, the collapse button will trigger an event. This event will then update a variable. And then the combination of these two things together will have an impact on the visibility of the menu item text, the collapsible button itself, and the width of the sidebar. We will also set the data type of this variable to be a Boolean, which means that it will only ever be true or false. So the output that comes from the formula will only ever be true or false. And when the value of this variable is true, all of these elements will be visible and the width of the navigation sidebar will be expanded. When the value is false, these elements will be hidden and the width will be reduced. In that way, the menu item, the collapse button, and the width will all respond to changes to the variable. Okay, so let's start to work on building out the actual functionality. And the very first step will be to create a variable. So when we come into the app itself, this is where we left it in terms of its design. In fact, let's just quickly preview the app. So remember at the end of part 2, we had created all these containers that will be controlled by each menu item. So the first thing we want to do is to create a variable. When you're clicked on any of the divs, it opens the styling attributes and events panel. But if you click outside of any of the divs, in other words, just click on the main canvas itself, it opens this page information on this page panel. And here you can see the second option here is variables. So let's press the plus icon and then let's name our variable menu open. Then we're going to place an initial value of true, and this is just going to be used for testing purposes because we're going to use the collapse button itself to trigger the change of this value. But now that we've set up our variable, let's just click done, and that's it. We can see we now have a variable called menu open. Now remember, because variables are invisible, this variable will not appear anywhere on the page, but all of these elements on the page can access the variable and it can share the contents or its contents with each of these elements. Okay, so with our variable created, we can now move to the next step, which is to create a click event. Now the idea behind this is we want to use the collapse button to create what Toddle calls an event. Then we want this event to run a formula, and then we want this formula to look at the current value of the menu open variable and invert it. So if the value is true, we want this formula to change the value to false. And if the value is false, we want the formula to change it to true. Now, fortunately, Toddle comes with a number of built-in formulas, one of which is called the not formula, or officially the not logical operator. And what this does is it takes any input fed into it and it inverts the result. So if the input is false, it returns true. If the value is true, it returns false. And if you think about it, that's exactly what we want it to do. We want it to look at the value of the variable, and if that value is true, change it to false, and if it's false, change it to true. So let's switch over to the editor and set this up. So let's click on the collapse icon, and we can see with this now selected, if we go over to the panel over here, we've been using the styling panel, the attributes panel, but now we're going to use the events panel, and we're going to click on this event here called click. And we're going to say when this button is clicked, we would like to set the value of the menu open variable. So let's click on that. Now the next step will be to actually feed the formula in. So let's click on the formula button, and now we need to find our logical operator. So we can see down here we have all these formulas that come with Toddle, but let's just type in not. And just so we can see as well, if we have a look here, it says not is the Boolean opposite of the input value, which is exactly what we just spoke about. So what this is doing, this is saying if the input is true, this not formula will work its magic and it will output a value of false, which is exactly what we want. So the final step here now is just to connect this to our actual variable itself. So we're going to do that by clicking on the input icon here, and we're going to search for our variables menu open. There we go. So now this formula, if we were to read it, basically says when the menu open variables value is true and it outputs that value of true, the input of this not operator will be true. And then once this not operator works its magic, it will output a value of false. Brilliant. So let's close this up and let's test it out to see how it works. So one of the features of variables is that they're hidden, they work in the background. So there's actually no way for us to directly see what the value of that variable is. So to do that, we're going to temporarily place a text field on the page itself, and then we're going to connect that text field to the variable so we can see the value of the variable. So I'm just going to click on this container here, press E, let's add a span. We can see it's added this span over here. Let's just move it up so it is in the middle of our screen so we can see it a little bit easier. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to click on the text of that span, and you can see here at the moment it's hard coded with the word span. Instead now I would like this text field to be dynamic, and I would like it to look to the variable and have that variable share its value with it. And to do that, I'm going to click on the formula button, and here we can see the value is hard coded to span. So if I wanted to hard code this to, I don't know, if I put the color blue or Buku, whatever that is, you can see it's now updated to Buku. But like I said, we want to connect this to the variable itself. So I'm going to click on the green icon, and I'm going to select variable menu open. And now this is feeding the current value inside the hidden variable called menu open. It's feeding it into this text field, which is exactly what we want. So that if I publish this, we can see the value there is true. Okay, so as a recap, this collapse icon, when we click on this, we are now running a click event. This click event is then setting the value of menu open, and it's basically doing that by using the not formula, and the not formula is looking at the current value, which is true, it's inverting it, and it's outputting a value of false. Okay, so that's what we have set up so far. So if we go back to our home page now, we can test whether this is working by clicking on the collapse button. And if at the moment the variable's value is true, when I click on the collapse button, it should change to false, which it does. And then if the variable's value is now false and I click on this collapse button, it should invert that using the not operator, which it does. Brilliant. Okay, so if we go back to our presentation here and review what we've done so far, we have set up the collapse button so that when you click on it, it triggers an event. This event executes or runs a formula. This formula uses the not operator to look inside the value, to look inside the variable, and it takes that value and it inverts it. So the value of the variable is always storing this particular value here. And now that we have this value in this variable, the next step is for us to set up these UI elements so that their visibility is toggled based on the value of the variable. Okay, so with that in mind, let's create a formula to do this. Now in Toddle, the visibility of elements can be toggled using formulas. And actually using booleans is probably the simplest way to do this, so stating whether the value of something is true or false. And when a new element is added to the page, it is visible by default. So let's jump into the editor really quickly and see how this works. So here I have just a blank page, and I'm going to add a button to this page. Okay, so we can see that by default the button is visible. Okay, now in most programs, if you wanted to toggle the visibility and hide the element, you could click on it and there'd be some type of an icon that allow you to hide it with one click. Now Toddle works slightly differently in that if you want to hide this element, you have to right click in the element tree on the element itself, and then you select this show hide formula. Then you click on this icon and you type in Boolean to add a Boolean value. Click on the icon again, and then we're going to select false. Now watch what happens to the button when I select false. It disappears. Now if I want that to appear again, then I hit true, enter true, and it reappears. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's a really long way to toggle visibility. However, what makes it really powerful is that by attaching visibility and the toggle of visibility to a formula, we can now make the visibility of elements respond to other events in the app. And this is going to be absolutely key to getting our collapsible logic to work. So let's go back to the preview of our app and let's have a look at what we actually need to achieve here. So when this icon is pressed, oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong page here. Let's go to the demo app, sorry. So when this icon is pressed, let's just make a note of what changes. So all of these text elements are hidden. This icon's hidden and the width is changed. So let's go in now and apply this new logic to the text elements here. So back in our demo app, so we can see at the moment with our demo app that we haven't set up. All we've set up so far is the variable. And then let's click on this dashboard element, which is in this span here. There we go, this span here. So we're now going to apply this logic to this dashboard text. So let's right click on the span, click show hide formula, and instead of connecting this to a Boolean, we are going to connect it to the value of our menu open variable. So let's click on the formula button, and here we're going to click menu open, and then we're going to click the button again and click again in order to pull in the value. And we're basically saying now, when menu opens value is true, this will be visible. And then when menu opens value is false, this will be hidden. And how do we change the menu value? Well, we use our trigger, which is the collapse button itself. So let's close this out. Let's open the preview version of the app. And if this is working correctly, when I click the collapse button, it's going to run the formula is going to run the not operator, it's going to take the value of the variable, invert it. If this value becomes false, then this will be hidden, and then if this value becomes true, this will be made visible again. So let's see if it works. There we go. So the value is false, so this is hidden. So now we just need to apply that same formula to all of our text items here. And to save time, I'll pause the video, apply it, and then come back. Okay, so I've now applied the same formula to all of the text elements. So when I click on the collapse button, we can see all the text elements disappear, which is good. And then when I click on it, they reappear. So now let's go and apply the same logic to this icon itself. So if I click on here, right click, show hide formula, connect it to the variable, then pull the value. Okay, now if we go and test this now and I click on this button, it will disappear along with the text, but I'll have no way to reactivate or to change this value again. So I need to apply the same formula that I've applied to this button in order to change the variable. I need to apply it now to this icon here as well. So for example, when everything collapses, I can then click on this icon and have that reset the value of the variable. So to do that, let's select this div here, and then I'm going to go over to the events panel. I want to click to create a click event, and then I want to say I want to set the variable, and this is just the exact same formula we did earlier on for the collapse button. Click there, select variable, true, and then we need to add the not operator as well. There we go. So when menu opens value is true, we want to flip it so that it becomes false. That's right. So with that done, if I go back into the main page now and refresh it, this will all disappear, but I can click on this icon here and have it reappear again. Brilliant. Okay, so the last thing we have to do to finish out the collapsible menu functionality is to have the width itself change when the value of the variable changes to false. So we can see in our actual demo version, we can see it changes there. Okay, so let's do that really quickly. So here in the editor, let's select the side panel itself. So this is the div for the side panel. And if we go on to the styling tab on the right hand side, we can see that when this page loads, this has a default style. And as part of that default style, the width is set to 280. Now to have the width change dynamically based on the value of the menu open variable, we're going to create a class. So if we go over to the panel on the right hand side, next to styling, we see attributes. Let's click on attributes and let's create a class. And we're going to call this class menu closed. And if we click back on the styling panel, what we can see is next to style, if we click the plus icon and we come down to classes, we've now created a class called menu closed. And with this class, we can affect all of the styling of the particular div that we've selected. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on size, click minimum max width, and we're going to say that when menu closed is active, we want the maximum width of this sidebar here to be 96 pixels. Now you can see the sidebar is actually now collapsed to 96 pixels. So what this means is the value here is true and it's collapsed to 96 pixels. So we're going to set a formula on this class. If we go back to the attributes tab and then next to the name menu close, we click on the formula, we're going to say when menu opens value is true, this is how it's going to behave, but we want it to behave in the opposite way. So the opposite way would be to make this true into a false, and to do that we're going to use this same not logical operator that we used before. So if I click on there and type in not, it's now going to invert this true value, and this means that when this is true, this sidebar menu will now be open. Let's have a look. So if I refresh the page, when it's true, full width, when it's false, it's narrowed and collapsed. Brilliant. Okay, so let's have a look at these containers now. So all of these containers are stacked on the same page and they're all visible, but we want to control the visibility of each of these containers using the menu items here. So when we click on dashboard, we want only dashboard to be visible and we want the rest to be hidden. And to achieve that, we're going to use a similar logic to the one we used with the collapsible sidebar nav, in the sense that we are going to have a trigger event that's going to push a value into some type of a container, some type of storage, and then we're going to have our containers themselves, so the dashboard container, so these containers, the dashboard, the teams, the projects container, look to this stored value, and when the stored value and the name of the stored value matches the name of the container, then that container will be visible. Okay, so let's go back to the editor. And we need to follow the exact same process that we used when we created the collapsible menu logic. And the very first thing we did was to create our variable, which acted as our container. So let's do this. So we're not going to use a variable this time. Instead, we're going to use a different type of container. So let's click outside of the design area so we can open the component data and click on page. Now, instead of a variable, we're going to create a query parameter. And this query parameter will live in the URL itself. And then we will have these containers look to the URL, and when the value of the parameter matches the name of the container will be visible. So let's click on add query. Let's call this query view, and let's enter a test value of dashboard. So we can see here now / view equals dashboard is going to be added to our URL. Let's click done. Okay, so to get that working, we now need to go to the next step, which is to push a value into the URL itself. And we will use the menu items to do that. So let's click on dashboard and let's create an event. So click event, and we're going to say when this item is clicked, we want to update the URL. We want to set the URL. And what do you want to set it to? We want to set it to dashboard because we've just clicked on the dashboard option. And then let's quickly do the same thing for Teams. When this is clicked, we want to update the view to Teams. When projects is clicked, we want to create an event. We want that to update the URL view to projects. And let's just quickly set up tasks and documents whilst we're here too, just so we can see the process. And actually, it's quite a simple process once you know what you're doing. Documents, there we go. Okay, so if we switch back to our test app now, our preview page rather, just refresh the page. This means now when I click on dashboard, this should be the event that pushes the value dashboard into the URL. Let's see if it works. Excellent. So it's now added this view equals dashboard. If I do Teams, projects, tasks, documents, brilliant. Now let's get these containers to respond to the value of this container. So let's click on the dashboard div itself, and we're going to go back and use our show and hide formula. So right click and select show hide. And this time, instead of attaching this to a variable to determine its visibility, we're going to attach it to the URL parameter. So let's click on the FX button, and there we can see we have this URL parameters view. So let's click it on that. So we've selected it. Now let's pull the value. So it's now pulled. Now what we want to say with this, we want to say that when the view is equal to dashboard, we want this to be visible. So to do that, we're going to add the equals formula. So we're going to say when this view, and the moment the view is dashboard, is equal to dashboard, we want this to output a value of true. When this value is true, this container will be visible. Okay. Now it'll probably make more sense if I show you what it looks like in real life. So let's refresh this. We can see at the moment that our dashboard panel has disappeared, or our dashboard container has disappeared, and that's because view currently equals documents. Now if I push the dashboard back into the URL, we'll see dashboard is visible again. If I select Teams, it's now hidden. So now we're using these items to actually control the visibility, and all of these containers are existing on the same page. And the reason why that's really interesting is because it means now that this framework is set up for a single page application. So let's quickly go back in and do the same thing for Teams. So we select the Teams div, right click, press show and hide, select the URL parameters view, then pull the view value, run the equals formula, and this time we want it to be equal to Teams. So let's test this out. Let's reload the page. So now when dashboard is selected, we see the dashboard. When Teams is selected, we see Teams. Brilliant. So I want to quickly pause the recording, set the rest up, and come back. Okay, so let's have a look. So now if I click on dashboard, we can see dashboard, Teams, we see Teams, projects pushes projects into the URL, we see projects, tasks, documents, and then settings will make everything disappear because we didn't create a settings container. Fantastic. Okay, so now it's time for the very final step, and that is to set up the navigation to go to a different page within the app. So when we click on the logout button, we'll go to a different page. I'll show you what that looks like here. So we click logout, takes us to a different page, and then we navigate back to the home page. So let's go back to our editor. Let's click on the logout div, and we're going to again follow the same process. We're going to create an event. So when that's clicked, we want to create a click event. And what we want to do here is we want to go down to the actions menu, and we want to go to URL. And the URL we want to go to is logout. And then let's click done. Now let me show you what that means. So if we come up to the left hand side here, we click on home page. Let's go to the logout page that we created. And if I click on the page itself here, you can see that this URL is actually set to logout. The path is called logout. So that's why we've set it to go to this URL. So it's navigating to a page within the app. Then if we click on this back home, we now need to set this link up. So to do that, let's click on the A element in the elements tree. And if we go over to the right hand panel here, we're going to select attributes. And because we added this element as a link, we have the attribute of a path that we can tell this link to direct us to. So we're going to select this. So at the moment it's set to the Toddle homepage, but we want it to go back to our homepage. So to do that, let's set this as /home. So now when this link is pressed on, it will navigate to /home. And let's go back to our homepage. And in the page settings here, let's create a path called home. And then click done. And that should be it. So let's preview our page again. And to test that it's working, let's click on logout. This takes us to our new page. And if I click back to home, we come back to the home page. Fantastic. So the last thing we need to do here is just remove that test value, and we set up this span here. So let's just delete that. Refresh the page. And there you have it. A fully functioning framework for either a single page app or a multi-page app, or a combination of both. Okay, so that wraps it up for this little series. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time.